Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, everyone. Welcome to our IEU webinar for civil society organization, private sector observers, and accredited entities, where we present approaches to our IEU evaluations. So we will start. My name is Anastasia, and I'll be a moderator tonight, and we welcome you all from Songdo. So I'll briefly present our program. Oh, and a few housekeeping rules. Please mute yourself. You can put your questions in the chat, or you can raise your hand. So we agreed that we will, you can put the questions and we will try to answer these questions at the end after all three approaches, after all three presentations. But you're free to maybe raise your hand after each presentation if you have an intermediate question, or put it in the chat box. So we'll present three approaches to three evaluations. The first one is approach of the independent evaluation of the GCF's investment framework that will be presented by my colleague Victoria Khan, Associate Data Analyst, Data Modeling. Then it will be followed by the approach of the independent evaluation of the GCF's approach to energy sector by Jennifer Pampolina, Communications and Uptake Associate. And Alan Mokano will conclude with the approach of the independent evaluation of the GCF readiness program. Then we'll have Q&A session, and then we have a closing. So now I give floor to Victoria. Over to you, Vic.
Thank you very much, Anastasia. I would like to welcome all our guests and colleagues. Thank you very much for your interest and for your time to listen to our approaches to this year's evaluations. So my name is Victoria, and to set the stage, I'm going to be showing you the approach to the independent evaluation of the GCF's investment framework. And without further ado, I would like, one moment, I would like to introduce the team. So we are quite a diverse team, consisting of internal and recently joined external contributors. Here from the HQ, Archie Rastogi, Dr. Archie Rastogi as a task lead, supported by Galina, myself, Dr. Martin Prowse, Yunsu Park, and we also have a very able team of external experts, Caroline Hagman, Emma Buckley, Huram Gilani, Andrei Berzhansky, and Nathan Gaylor, and under the overall guidance of the head of the evaluation unit, Andreas Royman. So a little bit of the background for this evaluation. This evaluation was approved within the IEU work plan for 2023 at B34, which is the last board of last year. And the main purpose of this evaluation is to assess the fit for purpose of the GCF's investment framework in fulfilling the GCF's mandate and strategic objectives. So we definitely going to be covering all the accompanying tools, policies, strategies, and necessary components, focusing on relevance and effectiveness. This evaluation is undertaken in parallel with other two evaluations of energy sector and the second RPSP evaluation this year. So just a little bit to set the stage for our external partners to refresh their memory about what is investment framework. Framework consists, it's a suite of policies and strategies, targets, and investment criteria in order to inform the design, assessment, and approval of funding decisions within the GCF. So definitely this is to translate the guidance, the allocation guidance, into specific guidelines for the investment decision-making. And a couple relevant decisions to the investment framework are, it was updated. So the first initial investment framework was approved at the 7th board meeting and subsequently updated by the GCF board in decision B27.6, paragraph K, and applicable from B27 onwards. And at B33, we had a decision on the principles for demonstrating the impact potential of the GCF supported activities. yes, for the GCF ecosystem. Moving on, as I've just mentioned, there are several parts to the framework. So part 1 out of 3 is the allocation parameters and portfolio targets. So these are the guidelines that directly affect all of us. Just thematic balance, 50-50 mitigation adaptation ratio, focusing on vulnerable countries, such as 50% of adaptation allocations in grant equivalent should go to LDC states and African states as vulnerable groups. Then definitely supporting developing country mitigation activities within the Paris Agreement to keep temperatures below 2 degrees, geographical balance across GCF identified regions. Direct access entities, so this is the funding channel to the national, private, and public sector entities that directly partner with the GCF. Where there is a private sector focus in terms of engagement to ensure that allocation of approved amount to private sector facility exceeds 20% in grant equivalent, and also the mobilized finance to significantly increase compared to the IRM, initial resource mobilization, and continue providing sufficient support for the readiness and preparatory program. Next, parts 2 and 3, we do have investment criteria. There are 6 of them. As many of you are aware, impact potential, paradigm shift potential, sustainable development, needs of the recipient, country ownership, efficiency and effectiveness. The policy set consists of the focusing on paradigm shifting projects and programs, grant equivalent accounting across various financial instruments, minimum concessional funding to make an intervention viable, providing finance for blending to our partners, and of course not crowding out other financial sources in the climate space, and for sound revenue generating activities to get loan finance. And now, this is the focus of today's presentation. What's the scope of the current evaluation? What type of questions we are trying to answer, and what type of findings we would like to share with our external audience? So in terms of relevance, to what extent does the investment framework align with the guidance provided by the UNFCCC COP and the GCF board? Effectiveness-wise, to what extent has the GCF's investment framework been effective in supporting the GCF to deliver its mandate? In terms of efficiency, how is the GCF investment framework put under implementation, and what is the efficiency of the processes to implement it? Yep, focusing on impact and sustainability. So to what extent has the GCF investment framework supported the delivery of impact on the ground? And 3 more, coherence and complementarity. Here in this context, we'd like to see to what extent has the investment framework enabled coherence and complementarity with portfolios of other climate funds, which are operating entities of the financial mechanisms, overall and on country level. Of course, replication scalability as important dimensions of paradigm shift. So how are the GCF investments supporting the replication and scaling up of climate projects and best practices, innovation and risk? That the GCF approach to investment give room for taking more innovative and risk-taking projects and activities, and has the GCF taken any so far? A little bit on methods and the timeline. As best practice from evaluation, we are using mixed methods approach, a desk review of relevant documentation, policies, and gray literature, supported by landscaping and benchmarking analysis. In terms of data analysis, we will use secondary primary data sources through interviews, internal systems, focus group discussions, and surveys. So definitely colleagues expect to hear from us. We are also considering an opportunity of deep dives instead of contributions because it's a policy level evaluation. So the angle will be adjusted accordingly. And timeline and key deliverables. We are going to be working on the approach paper, this approach paper, until the end of the month, and in parallel, of course, carrying out the data collection through interviews and identifying scenarios for deep dives, similar analysis. It's for until for May, June. July, August is the phase of analysis. And from September to November, this is the report drafting stage. So that's when our work will be sent out to advisory group and peer review. And of course, please expect webinars, a more series of webinars to our all external partners. Comms products will be out around B38. So this is when the submission of the report is expected. This is the first board meeting of next year. That was my quick review. I hope we will get interesting insights and suggestions. And now I hand over to the next. Oh, apologies.
Thanks, Vic. We can definitely hand over to the next speaker. Jennifer, over to you for the approach to energy sector.
Thank you, Anna, and thank you, Vic. So good morning, good evening, good afternoon to everyone. My name is Jennifer, and I'm the Communication Uptake Associate at the IEU and part of the Energy Evaluation team. And today I'll be presenting to you the approach to the independent evaluation of the GCF's approach to the energy sector. But first, to give you a little bit of background on the approach to this evaluation, it was approved at the GCF Board B34, and it aims to assess the relevance and effectiveness of the GCF approach to the energy sector. It also aims to inform the decision-making of the board on future strategy, policy, and guidance with regards to energy, look at the evaluate the likelihood of impact, identify factors for success and failure, and to provide lessons learned. Before we look into the specific questions that the evaluation will be covering, we wanted to briefly introduce what the GCF Energy Portfolio looks like. So here's a couple of facts and figures for you for now. There are currently 83 energy projects, around 38% of the portfolio. And currently there's an estimated 6.8 billion USD committed towards projects with energy investments. That's around 22% of the total GCF budget. And projects, and an interesting find is projects with energy interventions attract more co-finance in comparison to other projects. So the ratio of co-finance is 1 to 3.55 for energy projects versus 1 to 1.63 co-finance ratio. An important thing to note here, though, is that the information that's presented on the slide is based off of the Secretariat database, but as we go deeper into the evaluation, we're going to be taking a more tailored approach to data extraction and portfolio analysis. And the more detailed methodology of this data analysis will be covered in the approach paper, which will be finalized towards the end of this month and shared publicly towards the end of this month. So what are some of the key questions that we'll be looking at for this evaluation? Well, in regards to relevance and responsiveness, we will be asking how responsive has the GCF been to its mandate and also to the UNFCCC's energy sector approach and to country energy's energy sector needs. With regards to effectiveness, we'll be looking at how effective has the GCF been in contributing to achieving countries' climate goals with regards to reduction in emissions, co-benefits, linkages to adaptations, and paradigm shifts. And with regards to efficiency, we'll be looking at whether the Secretariat's support in the approval and implementation process, the project life cycle, whether the support has been suitable and effective. Other key questions we'll be looking at with regards to sustainability is what is the likelihood of the long-term sustainability of the results and approaches? With regards to coherence, how coherent has the GCF's delivery of climate finance been with regards to other multilateral entities? And we'll also be focusing here on the comparative advantages of the GCF energy approaches within the greater landscape of climate finance. And with regards to gender and social equity, we'll be asking how responsive have projects been to gender sensitive and indigenous people's approaches? And with regards to country ownership, how has country ownership been ensured in GCF investments? With regards to innovativeness and result areas, we'll be asking whether the GCF has fostered technical innovation and fostered the use of diverse financial instruments for the energy sector. And with regards to replication and scalability, we'll be asking, have GCF investments spurred further replication and or scaling up with an objective to transform a market globally or nationally? And then I really quickly want to go through some of the key main evaluation methods here. We'll be taking a utilization focus. So that will be looking at the learning, decision-making, performance, accountability, and adaptive management. We'll be taking a theory-based approach and method, in which case we have reconstructed the theory of change for the energy sector, and the full theory of change will be in the approach paper. We'll also be taking a realist evaluation approach, looking at what works for whom, in what context, and how. And we'll be really taking a highly participatory approach. In relation to that, what are some of the key data sources we'll be using? We'll be asking and consulting with a wide range of stakeholders throughout the process, including GCF Secretariat, other independent units, NDAs, CSOs, AEs, DAEs, beneficiaries, and energy experts. And lastly, we'll also be looking at desk reviews, synthesis, meta-analysis, internal, external reviews, benchmarking, portfolio analysis, focus group discussions, country case studies, deep dives, the analysis, and these kinds of other methods. And then with regards to what country cases we'll be looking at. So when looking at which countries to go to and which country case studies, there was a number of criteria that was discussed at the beginning of this evaluation. And so here you see listed the countries that we'll be going to and kind of the criteria that was related to how we chose these countries. So we'll be going to Mongolia, Zambia, Chile, Tonga, Indonesia, and Eastern Europe, which will include Serbia, Bosnia, and North Macedonia. And for Mongolia, this country offers an example of energy efficiency and energy access projects. It has a maturity of project status and country ownership, aspects of country ownership, and aspects of private sector involvement. With Zambia, there's aspects of energy access, and it covers the LDC context. And with Chile, there are completed GCF projects there, and also aspects of indigenous peoples approaches. And in Tonga, it covers the CIS context and also a project maturity aspect. And in Indonesia, there's a huge energy demand in that market, and it also is a large GCF portfolio. And with Eastern Europe, there's multi-country projects there, and it's also looking at coherence and complementarity. And lastly, the timeline and engagement. So there will be the approach paper that will be finalized towards the end of this month. And when it is finalized, it will be published onto our website and on social media. So please follow us for that. From May to August, it will be data collection and country missions. And from July to September, there will be the data analysis, follow-up data collection, validation. October will be the factual draft report with the final report to be presented to the board for B38. So with that, I will hand the floor back to Anna, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Jennifer, for this presentation. And now we move to the third one, to the final one by Ella on the RPSP. Over to you, Ella.
Thank you very much, ladies. I guess I'm the last presenter for the evening. Just bear with us for a bit more time. My name is Alang Klopper, and I will be presenting the approach of the independent evaluation of the GCF's readiness program, also known as the RPSP. I'll be using those interchangeably going forth. Next slide, Jen. For a bit of background, as Victoria and Jen have already mentioned, this evaluation was commissioned alongside the energy evaluation as well as the investment framework evaluation under the 2023 IEU work plan at B34. Now, unlike the other two evaluations, this is the second evaluation that the IEU will be undertaking looking at the readiness program. And our objectives will mainly to assess whether there has been progress made since the first evaluation undertaken in 2018. We'll also look into assessing the effectiveness and efficiency of the readiness program in meeting its objectives under the readiness strategy from 2019 to 2021, also known as Readiness 2.0. You'll see it in the slides in front of you. The intent as well of this evaluation is also to provide lessons for the readiness modality. When we move on to the scope, the evaluation will assess the readiness program within the broader context of all the GCF operational modalities, programs, and processes, Also taking into account the readiness 2.0. Again, that is the readiness strategy from 2019 to 2021. We'll also look into operations prior to 2019 to look at the respective priorities of the areas of readiness program over the 2 time periods, that is prior to 2019 and after 2019, to understand the significant changes between these 2 periods. That is the evolution of the priorities as well as the focus areas of this evaluation. Next slide, please, Dan. All right, so I'd like to just bring your attention to this purple line that goes across the graph. And this is just to kind of show you the growth that the readiness portfolio has undergone from 2015 all the way to 2022. Currently, today, we have the GCF has approved 639 readiness grants, which amount to around 460 million USD. So this kind of shows you the importance of this program and how we need to look at it. Next slide. Yeah. Thank you. So guided by our evaluation criteria, which you'll see on your left-hand side, that is the readiness, effectiveness, efficiency, you'll see that we have questions that this evaluation aims to address. Now, when we're looking at relevance, we want to ask the question, were the recommendations from the 2018 evaluation streamlined into the current readiness program? That would be the 2019 to 2021. We also look at the alignment of the readiness objectives with the beneficiaries and stakeholders' needs and priorities. When we move on to effectiveness, we first of all ask, is the readiness program achieving or expected to achieve the 5 objectives that stated within the strategy? We also look at, okay, what are the hindering and enabling factors to this progress across these objectives? But we also look at the patterns of the different results that are achieved, looking at the different priorities, priority groups within the GCF, that would be the SIDS, the African states, the LDCs, as well as the other GCF eligible countries. Efficiency, we question how easily accessible the readiness is for the eligible countries. We also look into the manner in which the readiness delivers the objectives. Is this economic? Is this timely? When we go on to impact, we look at are the countries getting more climate finance as a consequence of the readiness program, as well as are there any signals or signs that mobilization of resources from GCF and other financiers is shifting paradigm in ways favorable to the GCF goals. When we move on to the sustainability criteria, we ask the questions, are the GCF RPSP capacity building impact likely to be sustained at the country level beyond the readiness interventions? We also look at, to the extent, whether the GCF has informed enduring partnerships at the local, at national and regional, as well as international levels. Next, Jen. When we look at the country ownership criteria, we look at whether the GCF readiness has strengthened stakeholder capacity to engage in programming processes. When we look at gender and social inclusion, we ask the questions, has the readiness assisted the operations of countries to address human and technical capacity constraints in operationalizing the GCF's policy expectations related to gender, ESS, as well as indigenous people? We also look to what extent are the GCF's gender and social inclusion requirements reflected in the country or regional level planning processes, as well as other dialogues. Lastly, but not least, we look at the coherence and complementarity. Now here we look at 2 aspects. We look at the internal coherence within the GCF, but as well as external coherence. Now looking at the internal coherence, we ask, are mechanisms and capacities to deliver readiness suited to the objectives of the readiness strategy and the country expectations? We also look to what extent is readiness compatible with GCF modalities. Here we take a keen look at the project preparatory facility, that is the PPF. Now, when we move on to the external coherence or complementarity, we look to what extent and how is the GCF readiness coherent as well as complementary with other international supporting entities and donors. We also ask the question, what is the comparative advantage of the readiness relative to similar readiness or capacity building support provided by other organizations? Next slide, Jane. Now we'll move on to methods. Now this evaluation, like the energy evaluation, will be a utilization-focused, highly participatory evaluation that is also theory-based. Now, we're looking at the theory-based approach, which will, with the intent to actually provide learning and inform decision-making as well as performance improvements to ensure the usefulness of this program to the intended users, that is everybody within the readiness ecosystem. We're talking about the NDAs, the focal points, accredited entities, delivery partners, and so on and so forth. Now, we'll also be looking, oh, sorry, Jen, go back. Yes, we'll also be looking to perform key informant interviews. Here, we will be reaching out to most of you in this call, and thank you so much. This evaluation is a little bit a few steps ahead of the others. We have already moved to, we're already on the ground asking questions, having key informants, and we would appreciate if any of you would like to come forth. We will also be doing a portfolio analysis. We'll have an online perception survey targeting direct access entities, delivery partners. We will also have country case studies. I will move on to the next slide where I'll elaborate on how these countries were selected. Looking at the slide in front of you, we have 7 criteria that we used to select the country case studies. We looked at the number of grants as well as the volume. This is not to say we only looked at countries that had more readiness, but we also looked at countries that didn't have a lot of grants for readiness. We looked at country representation, geographical diversity of the GCF portfolio. We also looked at the GCF's priority groups, that's the states, the LDCs, and the African states. We looked at the accredited direct access entities and the approved project. We also looked at the pipeline of direct access entities, as well as the direct entity projects. We also looked at countries that have not been visited thus far by any of the GCF evaluations. Down here, you'll see the countries that have been selected. 7, we have Armenia, Belize, Ivory Coast, Bhutan, Laos, Mexico, and Tanzania. And I'd like to mention that Armenia, Belize, Tanzania, these missions have been completed. As we speak right now, colleagues are joining from Bhutan as well as from Laos. And we will be having Mexico and Ivory Coast in the coming month. Next slide, please. All right, moving on to the timelines. We're currently undergoing data collection. This, of course, involves interviews, data, the GCF's portfolio, country case studies, as I just mentioned. These are all ongoing and will go on until July. From July after that, we'll move on to data analysis, and we plan to take this evaluation, the final report, to the first board meeting of 2024, that is B38. I'd like to bring this presentation to a close. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much, everyone. Jennifer, there was one slide on the upcoming webinars. Maybe we can inform the audience of what to expect next. Thanks again very much for the active participation, for your questions. So highly appreciated. So we will have webinars on evaluation key findings and webinars on the final reports for each of our evaluations. So thank you very much. We wish you a good day, a good evening, good morning if you start the day. Thanks very much for joining us, and thanks very much for the speakers and for the evaluation teams who came in for the answers. Thanks a lot. Have a great day.